I don't know about you, but the only thing I'm taking away from tonight's Kings loss is that Sacramento doesn't want to face the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA Finals. The Kings have not won in Milwaukee since 2015. Unfortunately, that streak continues while the Kings' 7-game win streak comes to an end. We're breaking it down all right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And lots to break down from this Kings loss. It's unfortunate that the Kings didn't get to 8 straight wins because it would have been the first time since November 30th, 2003 that the Sacramento Kings won 8 straight games. That Kings win was inside of Arco Arena over the New Jersey Nets. Doug Christie started for the Kings in that game. He had 12 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal in the win. So that would have been fun to talk about. Unfortunately, that is not the case, as now we really see the first, I'm going to say, real loss in the Doug Christie era. I know he lost his first game to the Los Angeles Lakers, but that was fresh off of Mike Brown being fired, literally on the way to getting onto the team plane to go to LA. Doug was just basically had a clipboard thrown in his lap and said, "You're the coach now, figure it out." And the Kings were still a little shell-shocked and trying to figure some things out in that loss to the Lakers. Since then, they went on a 7-game win streak. Now they lose this game to Milwaukee. But let me tell you what I think is different and what I noticed from this game right off the jump. The Kings aren't catching anybody by surprise anymore. They've lost the element of surprise, right? Very similar to how the Kings exploded on the scene in 2023. The 2023-2024 season, that Kings offense is unbelievable. Nobody knows how to beat them, right? They go through that season. The Warriors did figure out enough in the playoffs to slow them down and beat them in that series. But really from that point on, the Kings have never really looked the same. One is because of how they've tried to incorporate different changes, and two is because of how teams have adjusted to them. By the start of last season, the Kings offense wasn't surprising to anybody anymore. Well, on the same much smaller sample size, this Kings 7-game win streak, I think, surprised a lot of teams. Yes, there were some favorable matchups over this time of Kings playing teams that were shorthanded. But who the Sacramento Kings have been so far this season up until the start of this win streak and who they were over the last couple weeks were two very different teams. And Doug Christie, to his credit, had figured out a way to get this team to start to click or fire on all cylinders or play the way that we were hoping that they would play coming into this season. Well, that element of surprise is now gone, right? You're on a 7-game win streak. You're one of the hottest teams in basketball, and the Kings ran headfirst into a Milwaukee Bucks team that looked as ready and prepared to attack them as we've seen so far during the Doug Christie era, right? Very different from how during the Kings' 6-game losing streak, teams looked at the Kings and they smelled blood in the water, right? Kings were getting circled like by sharks. We saw the Los Angeles Lakers and LeBron James come into Sacramento and beat down the Kings 2 times in a row. And the way LeBron was acting around the Kings was, man, we knew this team was on the back foot. We knew this team was weak. Tyrese Halliburton and the Indiana Pacers doing the exact same thing when they blew out the Kings in Sacramento as part of that losing streak. Everybody saw, like, yeah, these Pacers know that this Kings team is bleeding and wounded right now. That's not how the Bucks attacked Sacramento. The Bucks attacked the Kings in this game like, we know this team's rolling. We know they're balling. We know that they have a lot of confidence. We're not going to let them feel any sort of way. We're not going to let them bring any swagger with them into our building. We're going to hit them in the mouth right out of the gate. And that's what the Milwaukee Bucks did, right? They scored 47 points in the first quarter. They shot 18 of 27, 66% from the field, and 7 of 13, 53% from three-point range. So on one hand, you could just simply say, Matt, they were hitting shots. They came into a game and they really would not miss. Kings had no answer for Dame, no answer for Giannis. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But they just weren't missing. Like, the Kings just got blitzed offensively in that first quarter. They gave up 47 points. It's an anomaly. It happens. Some people also might see that first quarter start and revert back to some of the poor first quarters from the Mike Brown era here in Sacramento earlier this season and go, man, the Kings were lethargic again. They showed up. They weren't ready to play. I'll be honest with you, watching this game, and I'm going to go and watch the first quarter back again and torture myself by watching that again. But in real time, I was not watching that first quarter and going, oh, the Kings just don't have it tonight. I was not watching that first quarter and going, oh, the Kings kind of just walked into this game instead of ran into it. The Kings didn't take this game seriously enough. It's the final game of a 3-game road trip. It's a go-home game, so they're just ready to get on the plane and get to Sacramento. I didn't have those feelings. Again, everything about how this game started to me was the Milwaukee Bucks going, yeah, we know this team is balling. We know what they're doing right. We're not going to let them do it. We're not going to let them get comfortable. We're not going to let them bring the swagger that they've earned over these 6 games or 7 games. We're not going to let them bring that into our arena and hit us first. We're going to hit them. We're going to test them early on. Not having Malik Monk there, of course, hurts too. Malik Monk missing tonight's game with right groin soreness. Hopefully he'll be back for the Sacramento Kings on Thursday night against the Rockets here in Sacramento. Not having Monk hurts too. But, number one, Keon Ellis got the start, and the Kings have been really, really good when Keon Ellis starts. And number two, losing Malik Monk is not the difference between giving up 47 points and holding the Bucks to 28 or 29 points. And by the way, the Kings came into this game giving up about like 29.8 points per game in the first quarter, which is the 5th most in the first quarter. So this team has already had issues containing opponents in the first quarter. That's something Doug Christie and this team has done a really good job of during their win streak. But the Bucks recognized a weakness of the team, recognized a starter being out, and attacked Sacramento, was ready to go, did not ease into the game. And I'm not saying that teams are taking the Kings lightly. I'm not saying that teams have been looking at the Sacramento Kings and thinking, oh, we don't have to play as hard in order to beat them. What I'm saying is how the Kings have been playing over this last, let's say, 2 weeks. How the Kings have been playing over this 7-game win streak, I think, opened a lot of eyes around the league. Teams already recognized that this roster was talented, one of the best rosters that the Kings have had in 20 years. But they obviously weren't playing up to that level. Now teams know they are playing up to that level. And while the way the Kings are playing is new, the weaknesses that this team has are still valid. They're still there, right? Physicality and 3-point shooting being towards the top of that list. And look, the Kings still had their chances in this game. One of the things we've learned about this team over the course of this year is that if they fall behind early on, they're going to keep fighting. They're going to battle back. They've only given up literally one time, and that was in that blowout loss to the Indiana Pacers, and Kings fans let them hear it and booed them in their own building because of that second half. But the Kings have consistently fallen behind by double digits, fallen behind big, and fought their way back and made a game of it. Down 28 points early on in the second quarter. Kings got this game to as close as 16 in the second quarter, but ended up trailing by 21 at half. They got the game all the way down to 11 points about midway through the fourth quarter with like 8 minutes and 26 seconds or something like that to go. But they just ultimately couldn't get into single digits, couldn't close the gap, couldn't continue that run, mainly because of a guy named Giannis Antetokounmpo and his partner in crime, Dame Lillard. Those two are difficult for any team to deal with, but especially a team like Sacramento that struggles against physicality, which is, of course, that's Giannis's bread and butter. Again, I'll talk about that more in the second segment because I think what we saw of how the Kings tried to handle Giannis in this game is another clear message to the front office that, hey, we got some work to do. But again, I'll get to that in the next segment. Overall, this was still a fantastic road trip for the Sacramento Kings, right? That's important to understand. You're not going to see me, and hopefully you won't see too many Kings fans who are pro Mike Brown. You're not going to see us taking victory laps and going, oh, see, the Kings are back to being bad again. You're not going to see that because the reality is we all know that this Kings team is clearly playing better. They even played better in some elements of this game. But overall, this was a really, really good road trip for Sacramento. Like, anytime you can leave your home and head out on the road and be under 500 and come back at or above 500, that's a significant accomplishment. And the Kings did it by some very impressive wins. They manhandled the Boston Celtics. They came back in a lot of ways and closed out a close game in Chicago. Sure, they got bullied and beat up by the Milwaukee Bucks, but because of the work that they did ahead of time during this road trip, they can afford for that to happen. This was a good road trip for the Sacramento Kings. There's no reason to look at this loss and go, oh, man, the Kings are back. Oh, man, it was fun while it lasted. Here come the bad times. Now, it could happen. The Kings could unfortunately revert back to their old ways and kind of spin out of control a little bit, and that's something we'll talk about a little bit later on in the podcast. But overall, this was a really, really solid road trip that once again puts you in a position that you weren't able to capitalize on earlier in the season. The Kings were 500 going into that 6-game or that 5-game homestand, and they lost all 5 of those games, right? Failed opportunity there. Here's an opportunity where you're back at 500, you're coming home for 3 straight. Win these games, protect your home floor, build up a little bit of a safety net, because after that, you go on the road for a 6-game road trip, and 10 of your next 12 games after this 3-game homestand are on the road. So the Kings, here's an opportunity, right? You got your work done on this mini road trip. Now you have an opportunity to build upon it at home. Give yourself a safety net. Let's see if the Kings can ultimately try and do that. One thing I wanted to talk about with Doug Christie specifically really quick. And again, take all context of how I felt about Mike Brown or how you might feel about Mike Brown or anything. Take all that out of it. Just think about this. The Kings lost by 15 points. Doug Christie steps to the podium after the game. The first thing he says is, I'm proud of my guys. That's the first thing he says. Now, in the very next breath, he says giving up 47 points in the first quarter is unacceptable. But after a 15-point loss, the first thing the coach said was, I'm proud of my guys. Now, Doug Christie's messaging his delivery has been very different from Mike Brown, right? Maybe Mike would have taken the podium after this game and called out an issue for the Sacramento Kings. The players clearly weren't responding as well to that as maybe they should have, or Mike was hoping they would. The players have been responding really well to Doug and his philosophy of, I'm just going to shower them in love, shower them in appreciation. And it's clearly producing results. So one loss does not change that. But the reason why this caught my attention is because proud of our guys is the thing that Dave Yeager would say after Kings loss, after Kings loss, after Kings loss a handful of seasons ago, and it drove Kings fans nuts. I remember Kings fans made like a drinking game about, oh, Dave Yeager's going to say proud of our guys, drink at the start of every press conference. So I'm interested. And the way I think about this is not that, oh, Kings fans should be upset at Doug Christie because he said that to start this press conference. I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of, if Mike Brown's messaging got old, kind of being a hard ass, right? If that kind of abrasive messaging got old to the team, and the losing, of course, got old to the fans. If the Kings start losing again, but Doug Christie keeps this message of positivity and love towards the guys, but they're not following through and winning basketball games, does that get old? We don't know. I think it just piqued my interest, caught my attention, and I wanted your feedback and your thoughts on that. I don't think it's a negative thing at all. The way I feel is, 1, this is just one loss. 2, Doug Christie's proud of our guys were not just empty words or not just a crutch the same way I felt like it was for Dave Yeager. So I don't think it's an issue. I also don't think the Sacramento Kings are going to lose enough games for it to become an issue, or I'm certainly hoping not. But I'm curious how you feel about that. Let me know. At MattGeorgeSack on Twitter or Blue Sky. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below if you're watching on YouTube. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Hungry Root. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, I've had an ongoing problem. I just don't have the time, right? A lot of us have that same issue between work, life, watching Kings basketball, trying to eat healthier. I'm constantly feeling stressed out. I'd go to the grocery store and I'd buy the same things, oftentimes things that I didn't need, and they just go bad in my fridge, and then I'd end up with no time to actually cook the items that I got. And sticking to my health goals, we all know the struggle is real with that. So everything changed for me, though, when I discovered Hungry Root. Honestly, it's truly been a game changer. It's the easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress. With Hungry Root, it's like having a personal shopper and a nutritionist all in one. They take care of my grocery shopping, recommending meals and groceries based off of my tastes and my health goals, from anti-inflammatory to high protein, gluten-free options, and more. And the best part, every meal is ready in 15 minutes or less. So it saves you time. Quick, healthy meals that actually taste great, all delivered straight to your door. It's been a huge time saver and has made healthy eating so much simpler and tastier. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as I do. For a limited time, get 40% off of your first box and a free item in every box for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. So this Kings loss to the Milwaukee Bucks, to me, served as a reminder of a couple of things. Number one, the Sacramento Kings are not invincible, right? As fun as this Doug Christie era has been and the win streak has been, the Kings are not unbeatable all of a sudden. So that's number one. Number two is this team still has an issue with size, length, and physicality. They do. Two things can be true. Look, two things can be true. Number one, the roster is playing way better under Doug Christie. They're playing up to the level that we expected or we were hoping for coming into this season. Number two, there are still obvious areas of improvement that this roster needs. Obvious holes that if the Kings are truly serious about trying to make a push and go as deep as they can in the Western Conference and deep as they can in the playoffs, they cannot wait to address them. Sacramento's only option defensively against Giannis Antetokounmpo tonight were their centers, Domantas Sabonis and Alex Len. And lo and behold, he got Domantas Sabonis into foul trouble, right? He had to sit for a lot of that third quarter with 4 fouls. A lot of those fouls just trying to deal with and handle the physicality of Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's also quicker than Sabonis is. Now I'll say this. Giannis is the freak, right? The Greek freak is his name. He's a freak of nature. The Kings are not going to face Giannis Antetokounmpo every single night. They get it 2 times during the regular season. That's why I made the joke at the beginning of the podcast. The Kings don't want to see the Bucks in the NBA Finals because they'd have a really, really hard time with this team and trying to handle Giannis the way that they're constructed. So while I'm not saying the Kings need to make a trade because they couldn't possibly match up with Giannis, that's pretty much a problem for all 29 other teams in the NBA outside of Milwaukee. Matching up with Giannis is not a thing. Like, you just do your best. But the point is, the best that the Sacramento Kings had against a forward who plays with physicality, not a center, not like a Rudy Gobert or an Anthony Davis or one of those guys that likes to play down low in the post as a big man. I'm talking about a forward. The Kings' only option was to put their center on him. And then when that center got into foul trouble, Alex Len, you're a big body. Good freaking luck. Like that's all the Kings have. And that's the point. The point is, once again, a team was able to exploit. Granted, it's one of the best players in the world, but they were able to exploit a clear weakness on this team. Lack of physicality. Teams with size, length, and athleticism destroy the Sacramento Kings. They need to find a way to try to address that at this trade deadline if they can. Now, look, if the Kings have Cam Johnson tonight, Cam Johnson's not shutting down Giannis Antetokounmpo and slowing him down, right? Well, we can be honest. We can be real. Cam Johnson's not making that big of a difference against Giannis. Does Cam give the Kings some more forward depth and some defensive depth? Sure, absolutely, which is why the Kings are, in theory, having talks about him and are interested in pursuing him. I guess you could say the same thing about Kyle Kuzma, although I'm not necessarily interested in that route for the Kings. It's less about specific matchups. It's less about having someone to guard Giannis or having someone to try and slow down LeBron or anything like that. And it's more about limiting a clear blueprint for teams of how to beat you, right? There's a clear advantage that every team knows that they can have against the Sacramento Kings. If you play guys with length, size, and athleticism, and you have a number of them, the Kings really don't have more than one answer for it. And that answer has been Keegan Murray, up to this point, at least at that forward position. So Sacramento needs to be aware of this and needs to address this. It's like why I talked about this with Chris Biederman on the last episode. And 2 episodes before that, after the Kings won their 7th straight game, I said, while you do want to be cognizant of the chemistry of this group and how well they're playing together and not want to potentially disrupt that or kill that by making a move. Remember the Iman Shumpert move from a couple of years back, right? How as soon as the Kings traded Shumpert, how much of a negative effect that had on the way the Kings were playing that season. This team is way better than that team, by the way. But you have to be cognizant of your chemistry and how a move could potentially disrupt that. But at the same time, you have to be aware of the holes of your roster, holes that you have had for 2+ years that you have taken too long to address, which has left you in this position to begin with. Just another thing for the front office to pay attention to. And hopefully this game is a good reminder that this roster is playing way better. Things are way better right now under Doug Christie. But they still have issues that teams are more than ready to exploit. And teams like Milwaukee can pretty much exploit with ease. This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by Wayfair. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has everything that you need, all within your budget. Whether you're looking for furniture that matches your style, right? My style at my house, my wife is very much into like kind of the farmhouse style. We found some great pieces on Wayfair. We're looking to replace our couch right now that's been decimated by 2 cats and a 3-year-old. Wayfair is the route that we are going. We've already found some great pieces that, again, fit into our budget. They have free and hassle-free delivery for even the largest items. They'll bring them right to you, help you set them up. It's as simple as it could possibly be. Wayfair's site is also super easy to navigate. If you know specifically what you're looking for, you can get to it quickly without having to sift through hundreds or thousands of items that don't really fit that style or that comfort level that you are going for. There's something for every style and every home and every budget and every space. Whether it's a big room, a small room, everything in between, you can find it all on Wayfair. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. So I was listening to D'Lo and KC today on ESPN 1320 while I was driving here to the ABC 10 studios. And I got to say, they gave me road rage. Because they were talking about, apparently there's been some articles, I don't know if it was ESPN, but it was like predicting who's going to be named to the All-Star teams. And in these predictions, Domantas Sabonis was left out. De'Aaron Fox was mentioned as a potential wild card, but Domantas Sabonis was left out. And as they were talking about it, I started thinking about it more and more and got into my feelings and got frustrated and probably took it out on like the poor lady in the Toyota Corolla in front of me. The idea, the very real possibility that Domantas Sabonis can be snubbed again. Now, I'm not talking about fan vote. Fan vote is fan vote. It's a crapshoot. Kings are never winning the fan vote unless they have a generational superstar, which, as much as I love Domas, as much as I love Fox, we know those guys have not reached that status yet. But when it comes to the coaching vote, which is how the reserves get in, Domantas Sabonis was not voted in as an all-star by the coaches last season. And I'm already mentally preparing for them to screw up again. He's the reigning Western Conference Player of the Week. Averaged 22 points, 20 rebounds, and 7 assists, for God's sake, last week. That includes a 28, or was it 29, rebound performance against the defending champion Boston Celtics. And somehow, this man has gotten better. This man has gotten better this season. I did not know that it was possible for him, realistically possible, for him to play better than he did last season, right? When he was second in the league, or did he lead the league in triple-doubles? He's right there at the top with Nikola Jokic, led the league in double-doubles, back-to-back NBA rebound champion, right? Domantas Sabonis was unbelievable statistically last year. And I didn't know if it was possible for him to get better. Well, he has. His scoring is up from 19.4 to 20.7 points per game. His three-point shooting has skyrocketed from 37% to 46% on twice the amount of attempts per game. He is currently second highest in the NBA in three-point shooting percentage. Guess who's he's behind? Nikola Jokic. Those two are just always 1 and 2 next to each other, aren't they? His rebounding, the back-to-back rebound champion, his rebounding is up from 13.7 to 14.2, and once again, he's right at the top of the league in double-doubles. He's doing the same things he's been doing and doing other things even better. Everything statistically you need from this man to be worthy of an All-Star or All-NBA selection is there. I mean, for God's sake, he was named to the All-NBA third team last year in the same year that he wasn't named an All-Star. It didn't make sense then. It doesn't make sense now. And again, he's even better right now than he was then. So please, NBA coaches, I beg you, don't embarrass yourselves again by making the mistake of keeping this guy out of it. And if your only argument, because it truly is the only argument of not having Sabonis be an All-Star is because of how the team is playing, the team's success, the Kings being a 500 team. And hopefully they'll be slightly above 500 or maybe more than that by the time we actually get to the All-Star game. But as of right now, the team is a 500 team. If that's the case, that's your only argument, then unless they win the fan vote, which a lot of these guys will, I don't want to see Steph Curry because the Warriors suck. The Warriors are really bad. I don't want to see Victor Wembanyama, who again is going to get in. Both those guys are probably going to get in via the fan vote. Victor Wembanyama is unbelievable, but the Spurs are worse than the Sacramento Kings, are right around the same level of the Sacramento Kings right now. I don't want to see Kevin Durant or Devin Booker on the Phoenix Suns that are drastically underperforming. Again, KD will probably get in via the fan vote because it's just a popularity contest, but he doesn't deserve it compared to Domantas Sabonis if we're just going off of how well the team's playing. The Suns have more talent than the Kings and are playing worse than them. And then I sure as hell don't want to see anybody for the Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid, forget about it. When he plays, he's playing terrible and halfway quitting on his team. The rest of the time, he's on the shelf with more injuries. Tyrese Maxey's a good player, but Philly sucks. Paul George has been their big addition. They're still bad. I don't want to see any of those guys make it via a coaching vote. I know they're in the East versus the Kings in the West, but regardless, like if that's the parameter that you have, keep it consistent. Because there are going to be guys that are that get the vote because of name alone and reputation alone, but Domantas Sabonis is not going to get in for statistically being better than them and having an even better year than he's had in the 2 years that he was named to All-NBA because of how the Kings are playing. Man, it's funny how those goalposts change here in Sacramento. And it's not the first time it's happened, too. De'Aaron Fox missed out on being an All-Star a couple of years ago. Remember this? When Dame Lillard got his spot? Because Dame Lillard was having a fantastic year statistically on the Portland Trail Blazers, who were worse than the Kings that year. But Dame Lillard still got in because it's Dame Lillard. The realities of being in Sacramento. All right, now that I'm off my soapbox with that, I will say Kings-Rockets Thursday. Unfortunately, they're not bringing an 8-game win streak home with them, but I still expect the Golden One Center to be raucous and excited to see their team back at 500 with how well they've been playing. The Golden One Center is going to be awesome that night. In addition to that, that game is a national TV game. That game's on TNT. So that's going to be really exciting. But I am very much looking forward to seeing how this team responds. Because, again, this to me is the first real loss in the Doug Christie era. The first real loss. How does this team handle adversity? How does Doug Christie adjust? Does he keep this team from falling back into their same kind of old bad habits? Coming home, and that first home game after a road trip has historically been terrible for Sacramento. Can Doug Christie have them ready to go, ready to attack? Can Doug Christie have the Kings attack the Rockets on Thursday night the same way that the Bucks attacked the Kings on their home floor tonight? If Doug can figure that out, then yes, this team is different. But this is really our first real test of how much better they've gotten. Because as fun as this win streak has been, and as great as the vibes have been, The saying is, right, you're not truly tested until you face adversity. You don't really show who you truly are until you face adversity. Here's our first real glimpse. I'm looking forward to seeing it on Thursday. Now, again, I want to hear from you. Your thoughts on tonight's game, your thoughts on Doug Christie, anything that we talked about in the show. Hit me up at MattGeorgeSack on Twitter or Blue Sky. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Looking forward to Thursday. I will see you at the game. If you're going, top of section 105, that's the media area. Come by and say hi. If I'm not up there, I'm usually up there like 15 minutes or 10 minutes before the game. I'm up there the entire game during halftime and stuff like that. You want to come by and say hi. Would love to see you. Appreciate your support regardless, no matter where you're at, whether you go to Kings games in person or are watching the Kings or watching this podcast from the other side of the world. Appreciate you so much. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.